You're going to have to turn the sound down on your phone. Just bomb the sound down totally. And there's about a 20-second delay between Facebook and this particular feed. So let me just
share.
So hello to those joining us. We are just getting our feed going. So we will start chatting shortly. Just gonna post it in 1-2 places, people that wanted to watch. Post it there, and then let's do it on this group. More. Okay. So cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me, Dawn. Much appreciated. Yeah, I've been doing actually quite a couple of these. So how's the lockdown been treating you so far?
It's been good. Been kept busy with the kids. So it's been, yeah, and I've just opened the practice. So just a bit of juggling, but it's been good. It's actually been, I think for us, it's been nice because Glenn's still been working. So yeah, just good time together, sorting out the house, running around my garden.
Okay, that's cool. I've got, yeah.
Yeah, no, and just keeping busy, but it's been a nice time to reflect as well. So yeah.
And now, so you say your practice is open. What does that mean? Like, are you fully open?
I am. I just have different hours. So I'm working actually off-peak hours, so 5 to 6:30 p.m. in the evenings and on weekends, so the mornings. So it's probably going to be more flexible for people. And then, yeah, those are my times, which is cool.
Oh, cool. Well, that's good to know. So those that are probably on here today are probably needing a physio in some way or another, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, yeah, hello to all the attendees on the chat and all the guys on Facebook Live. So we're obviously going to be chatting to Dawn from Active Physio about injury prevention today. And yeah, so we're going to have a lot of fun. We want to keep it interactive. So if you do have any questions, you're welcome to post them in the Fighting 100 live feed. So if you're not on the Fighting 100 page, I'm probably not going to be able to see it. So if you're on the Fighting 100 feed, just pop a question in there, I'll see it. Otherwise, you can, if you just scroll down on the page that you're on, you'll find the registration link for this webinar. You can just pop onto the actual live webinar and we will then be able to see your questions that pop up. Yeah, so maybe a little bit of a start, maybe a bit about yourself, your practice, how you started, how did you get into physio, all that sort of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, so my name's Dawn. I'm a physio based in Durban. My practice is in Westville. And yeah, I started it just last September. So it's all new, but very exciting. And yeah, running is a passion of mine. I've run for ages. I've done 2 comrades and slowly getting into the distance. And I love my trail. So getting more into that. I have a little bit of an injury that I'm just getting over, which we can talk about as well. But yeah, practice is good and I focus a lot on runners. I do a special running analysis and it's not just for people who are injured. So my big key thing is to prevent. So if we can do prevention, I analyze how you run. We also look at muscle strength and length and balance, so between left and right. And if there's anything that is highlighted, it's something you can work on. And it can also help you with improving your technique as well. So not just if you're injured, but if you do get recurring injuries, it can be helpful. Or if you want to improve, it may be something that will be of benefit. So it's kind of for everyone. And yeah, my practice is very chilled, very personal. I just want to help people get back into their sport activity or to living well, pain-free, and also just to, yeah, just to get back to that. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Awesome. So Dawn, tell us about your recent injury. Okay, that was quite a serious thing. You ended up obviously going in for operation. I was on that one run at Giba with you when I think you were coming right after the first initial injury. So maybe just a little bit about that, because I mean, I've often said it in one or two of my videos that you understand runners because you are a runner and the frustration of having an injury. And I think that's why we've got quite a couple of people watching today as well, because even the word injury like puts panic in our hearts, like Flip, because we're planning for something, got a big event, we've got something that we're working towards. And I know for you it was Ultra Trail Cape Town. And then injury strikes, it is devastating. So maybe just tell us a little bit about your injury that you've just come through.
Yeah, so mine has been, I feel like I definitely know rehab inside and out now on the hamstrings. So a year ago, in about a week's time, I tore my left hamstring, but not the actual muscle bulk. I tore the hamstring away from the bone, so the proximal hamstring tendon. So you've got two attachments. You've got three hamstrings, but there's a common one and then another one, and I tore the big common one off the bone while playing hockey. So I didn't know it at the time. I knew I'd done something quite severe, but I went and got assessed by a physio, by a biokineticist, and I did all the right things, and I was improving, but extremely slowly. So I thought I was just, you know, I tore something like the muscle bulk or what have you, and it would just take time. So I was being assessed and I was rehabbing. I stopped running. I couldn't run. I literally couldn't run. It was too painful. It was just, yeah, it was quite severe just to sit. I had to have a cushion under my backside so I could actually sit. But it was quite an unusual injury because I was very fit going into the injury. So I ran like 6 times a week, and I had done strength training. So I could do a lot more than people thought I could do with what I eventually found out I had. So 5 months later, so I ran with Shaun in Giba at night, and I could run, but it was just uncomfortable. And when we actually split off, Shaun went in one group and Kim and I just finished off earlier because he was running quite a long time into the evening. I managed to kick a stone on my left leg and I went through the ceiling again. And that was about the 3rd time that happened, but very, very severe pain into my buttock. So after 5 months, and I did that another run with Kim, but it was very severe. And I thought, this isn't right. After 5 months of rehabbing, of being careful, of strengthening, of doing everything, this isn't right. So I went for a scan after seeing my physio, and yeah, it was completely torn off, detached by 2 centimeters. But thankfully the muscle bulk was still intact, which is why it was hard to distinguish, because the physio even couldn't feel, and she's a very experienced physio, Karen McKenzie, she couldn't feel that there was a big dip because there was also a lot of scar tissue. So September last year, the 25th, I went for an operation. I got it, people had different ways of calling it. I had it reattached to my bone with 3 helicoil screws that they actually screw up into your bone. And I had to stay off it completely for 6 weeks on crutches. And then only in January, so like 3 to 4 months later, was I allowed to walk run on it. And I've rehabbed since then. So it's been 7 months, 7.5 months. So I'm just getting back into things now. Yeah, but I still don't have my speed, but I'm comfortable running. I don't have any pain. I haven't had pain for a long time. And I've done huge amounts of strength training specifically to this injury. I've listened to my body. I've pretty much done all the advice that I give to people. Unlike what some people say, I really have backed off. If anything hurts up a hill, I stopped and walked, or I changed the plan. And I think that's what's really important, because as runners, we're very pig-headed and we have a goal in mind no matter what. And sometimes we need to, especially if it's in a training phase, competition's different, but training phase, we need to sometimes back off to look for long term. So yeah, so that's where I'm at with that.
So that's such a massive process, or that you've gone through. Like obviously the worst of the worst that you can probably have, like a tendon detaching from the bone. But okay, I thought maybe let's start things off like this. So everyone at the moment has been running around their gardens in circles and killing their grass and doing sort of crazy things. And the story goes like this. So I went out for my first run on, when was the lockdown? On Friday.
Yeah.
And I just did an 8K, but I felt amazing and I belted it. I literally had to recover for 3 days after that. My legs were so sore. It was worse than the 130 Ks I was in my garden, was that little 8K that I did. So obviously guys have been doing a whole bunch of running in the garden. And obviously we're at massive risk now when we're going back onto the road, we're getting back into our training schedule. What sort of things should we look out for? How should we approach our training?
Yeah, 100%. So I think like anything, you can't go back to what you were pre-lockdown. You're on a different terrain. Even if you were on a treadmill and you had access to a treadmill, that's still going to be a little bit different to the road. You'll probably adapt a little bit faster and you'll feel that, but it'll still be different. So you've got to treat it like gently, ease in gently, and rather do less than more. I think, yeah, it totally depends on background, on how much you've done in lockdown in terms of strength. I've had quite a few running friends who weren't able to do a lot during lockdown, and it's helped them in terms of that break. And they've gone back by feel. So they kind of don't, and that's one thing I like, don't look at your watch, switch it on, don't look at it, and just go by feel. But I think that is the thing. It's hard to not sprint out of the gate because we want to, and I think that's already happened over the last few days. What I've actually done is I plan my week ahead. So I've got goals in mind, but if I've been running 2 to 3 times in lockdown, what I'm doing now is I'm running maybe 3 to 4 times, but spacing it out, and then just going from there. So I think it's very important just to, see where you've been and just back off a little bit. The key thing I would say in the next 2 weeks is just be careful with your heel training and with your speed. I would actually just ease that off. I wouldn't even bother much with that. You know, if you want to speed up a little bit within your run, that's fine to stretch the legs. But those are 2 places you'll be quite vulnerable if you haven't been doing that. If you have been running up a driveway and it's tar and you've been used to doing that over the 5 weeks, that might be different. You can maybe then carry on with that a little bit. But I think it's just to be careful with that, because it's going to be a different surface. The garden, obviously we've been going, most people, a lot slower, and already your cadence and your stride and your way you run is different. You use different muscles in different ways. So again, it's almost like a new sport in terms of going from road to trail a little bit. So yeah, just to take it a bit easier. And I think the biggest thing is to, once you've gone on your run, see how you are afterwards. If you're a little bit achy, like in the calves, like you've said, see if it's just an ache or is it a pain. If you need to take that rest, take a day's breather, do cross training if you need to, but be careful of ballistics, so the jumping things, because that's going to, especially the calves, that'll put a lot of pressure through the calves. But what you can then do is, if it eases off, you can foam roll, stretch a little bit, and then you can go on and run again the following, like alternate days. And that would be better than consecutive days at this stage. And that would also be another suggestion to do.
Okay, you mentioned something there where I want to jump onto is foam rolling and stretching. The 2 words there. So now, okay, in a week, we're talking injury prevention now. Okay, so ideal world, I always want to roll at least once a week, but it doesn't happen. I put it off because it takes a bit of time. It's a bit annoying. But ideally, what would be like a good sort of regime in terms of rolling and stretching? And I'll throw that one straight back to you.
Okay, cool. So there's a huge thing, and that was one of the questions we were asked about foam rolling and stretching. And the bottom line is it's got to be a personal thing. The actual scientific evidence is thrown either way if you actually go and look it up in terms of foam rolling in particular and stretching. There are a few guidelines though that are generally accepted, and I'll explain those. So in terms of stretching, we'll start with that. What I would suggest is when you're starting your run, the first K, just to take it easy. And that's going to be your warm-up. If you have things that you feel need stretching additionally because you've just woken up and you're quite tired, then you can do some dynamic stretching. What that means is you do stretching with movement. You don't sustain it, you don't hold it, you do gentle dynamic stretching. So you can kind of go into a gentle lunge, but straight from there you go to another lunge and stand up. You don't hold the position. And that's what they suggest before doing exercise. It just warms up the muscles, doesn't overstretch too much that you're vulnerable from the stretched muscle that now is going to exert itself. Then after the run, what I've done is I find that, especially like with comrades training, or when you're really peaking training, or now in this period where it's new and something different and you find things are a little bit niggly, I then concentrate predominantly on the legs, because as runners, that's where we're going to most likely get tight. And what I would suggest is, if you're finding anything is tight, so for example, the calves are a common area, after your run, while you're having your drink, while you're chatting to your husband, wife, kids, or what have you, just stretch out the calves. And what that means is a gentle stretch. Most people know what the calf stretching looks like. Off a step is better. Don't bounce, hold it. Again, the times are different, but what I would suggest is hold for a minute, then it's a good hold. You can do a straight leg and a bent leg, because there's two sets of calf muscles. So the straight leg stretch gets your gastrocnemius, which goes over your Achilles and your knee joint. And the bent knee stretch gets your soleus, which is the deeper calf muscle, which is just a one joint muscle over your Achilles ankle area. And I would say then anything that feels niggly, stretch it afterwards. And if you a time factor, just focus on those one or two things. If you find afterwards you're really getting tight, and no, after your run you really, you know, it's a bit much, you need to stretch a bit more, then look at your quads, your thigh muscle, your hamstrings, a little bit into your piriformis, so your figure of four stretch. We can put stuff like that up if you're wanting that, and your hip flexors, so your lunge will get your hip flexor stretch. Those are the ones that you want to concentrate on afterwards. And especially if you've got a sitting job. So if you're predominantly in front of the computer at home now or at work, you're going to get really shortened hip flexors and quad muscles. So additionally, just that change in work can also affect your running now, where before it might not have affected it as much. And that's also things you've got to consider. In terms of foam rolling, again, what works for who, you know, and some people find some things work, some things don't. Foam rolling, I find, is a nice warm-up. So I would say I wouldn't do it too vigorously if you want to use it as a warm-up. So just very gently go over to the area. I don't like going hell for leather personally. I like to find those spots and it's sore, but I don't like to really kind of, you know, like absolutely murder it. And you just need to hold it for like 30 seconds, honestly. It will work it out a little bit. And again, it just kind of stretches out that tissue, helps with a little bit of blood flow in that area. It's trigger point therapy, like as though the physios are kind of really putting on the pressure over there. And again, it's a case of finding what works for you as well. You can also do it afterwards, and in that case, you can go a little bit harder if you want to do afterwards to really kind of get into those knots. But I would do that post exercise. You're nice and warmed up, really to get into the glutes area. Although I like to use a tennis ball there because it really gets it in nicely. And then your quads and your people with ITB problems. What works really well is the outside part of your quad and the back part of your hamstring. The actual ITB is very hard to stretch. It is massively strong, and there's a query whether you can actually stretch it, but you can stretch the tissue that attaches into it. So your quads muscle, your tensor fasciae lata, TFL at the top of your hip, and your hamstring muscles at the back. So you stretch out those and can foam roll those, and your glutes that also feed in at the top. And then you'll give more space to that ITB and allow it to be, you know, more adaptable. So that's also a really nice place. But the bottom line with stretching is, one, find what works for you. Two, if you are finding niggles and a little bit of tightness, especially straight after the run or a little bit later, work on those areas. So target the certain areas so it doesn't take too much time. But it is advisable to get some form of flexibility that allows you to do your sport. But as runners, we do tend to be a bit tight, and that tightness mechanism in the calf is also good. But there's a balance. And also, especially, and this is a big one, if your left is very different to your right or vice versa, try get it even. That is a really, really big one. So that's a nice test. Test it out, stretch it out. And if you find, oh, my left is really tight, work on that so it feels the same as the right side.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Dawn. And yeah, I must say, like, the one thing I've always found is, I mean, I'm definitely a roller. I find when I'm rolling consistently, I'm definitely not getting as many niggles as in when I'm not, when I'm neglecting it, when I'm feeling tight, but I'm like, oh, I'm over it. then I'm picking up those little tears and whatever. But let's maybe pop onto one of those questions that came in. I thought was quite cool. I'll read out. So how do I manage micro tears in the calves when you're preparing for events? Okay, so the tears already happened. You've entered the events. You're a few weeks out, but you really want to do it. So I mean, that's exactly what happened to me, I think, last year for that Fighting 100. It was even longer. It was like 6 weeks out. I think I tore it on that run. So let's talk about massive event. I want to do it. I've got a little niggle. Can I do anything to manage it, or should I stop?
100%. So brilliant question. A lot of things I would need to find out to give a really realistic answer to that. So I think the easiest is just to delve into a couple of things that I would need to know, and then I can give kind of guidelines around that. So I think the first thing is, the history of the person in terms of, is this the first time it's happened, or is this a recurring injury? Because if it's recurring, then it's going to be harder to manage. If it's the first time it's happened, you've got a really strong chance potentially that we can maybe hone it in, do some things, get you going, and you've got a strong chance to compete. So that's like the biggest thing, is finding out those things first. And then also, how did it happen? Was it a one-off thing? Was it something that slowly came on? That's also really important, because it'll give us a time frame as to how severe it is. Did you have bruising? Were you able to walk, or was it quite easy to get around afterwards? And that just helps us as physios and as health professions to guideline kind of time frames, which can then realistically say, look, there are some miracles that happen, and there's some dog people who can get through, but also it's saying realistically, look, this is what we're looking at, but let's try it and let's go ahead. So those are the main things. Also kind of pain levels, and with runners, this is very relative, because runners tend to have, especially endurance runners, very high pain threshold. And so I'm very aware of that. And I think it's also activity based. So I often try to find out, how are you after a run? How are you when you're just sitting there? Is it still aching? And then also when I see the person, I'll look and feel the tissue and do some jumping tests and hopping tests, which is really important. That's quite a nice test to do, is if you can hop on one leg for 30 seconds with a calf and there's no niggles, or for 30 seconds to a minute, that's a good indication that maybe you can start running and putting some pressure on it. Not a lot of runners have patience with that, but that is a good tester. Another thing is this event your be all and end all? Is this something you've been training for months? Is this something you've been training your whole year towards? Or is this a stepping stone towards something? Or is this something that, it's okay, you can do it, you want to do it, you've paid money for it, but you've got other things on the plate? So I really do encourage people to find out, what is your main goal? Is your main goal, like mine was UTCT 65, so the other races didn't matter, and I was going to see how that went. Or is this just a stepping stone? And I then, obviously the runner has to decide. In the end, it's their choice, and I weigh it up and I say, look, if this is a stepping stone and you run it, and it's quite a hard run, and you race it, because you'll race it, then the chances are, at this stage, depending on where they are, you might injure yourself further. If you injure yourself further, it's going to take longer to get you better, if we can, for your main event. So you've got to weigh up the pros and cons, and that's also what I do. I say, look, this is likely what's going to happen with what you've told me and what we see. You probably can do the event and you'll get through it, but you probably will come out more injured. And then you've got an injury on top of an injury, and that's even harder to master. But if it's a race that you're really wanting to do, and you're a runner that's run, regularly, and you are fit in that regard, and maybe this was just because the training was just a bit much and you just tweaked it a bit, we'll take it from that scenario, then there are some things you can do. First thing is recognizing it early. So you have got a niggle, and when you run, it is painful. First, let's see if we can back off on a few things so that you can carry on running. As much as possible, I want you to carry on running, because then we can keep the fitness up, keep the motivation, etc. So we first try that. So we reduce all the loading things. So can we reduce your speed? Can we reduce the amount you do in the week? Can we reduce the distance you do in a day? So if you need to do a 20K, can we split it into a 10K and a 10K? So you still do your 20, but just split it. Can we try flatter surfaces for your runs? and things like that. Make sure you get all the other things, your nutrition, your sleep, make sure your equipment is good. So make sure all of that. If it is a calf injury, which we're talking about, you can also look at a calf sleeve, which I found does help for a lot of my runners. And you can use that during and after your run to assist with, it helps with just circulation in that leg. Okay, so that's really, really helpful. So you can use it during just to kind of really support that calf muscle, and afterwards as a recovery aid. And that's something they can use. Also to get into the routine of icing afterwards, because our muscles get nice and big, and you know, if you've got a little injury there will be some swelling around there, especially even if you're backing off a little bit. Ice it afterwards. 10 minutes is all it needs. You can even glad wrap whatever around it so you can walk around and do your stuff. But that's probably the biggest thing. And then the other thing is take off anything that you don't need to do. So if you are doing like heavy jumping exercises and you are doing other things that are going to aggravate your calf muscle, take that off and focus on the few things that are really important. So if your distance is important, try to keep that. And if that is too much, we can back off on that as well. But yeah, also firstly, just really get assessed and come early, but come to someone who, you know, won't just be like, no, stop running, because that's not helpful for anyone. That might be one of the answers, but it'll be stop running for now. Let's do A, B, and C, and then we can get you back, or stop running for, you know, 10 hours a day or whatever. So that would be the main things. Yeah, and I think those are the main kind of things to consider for that. Yeah,
and maybe to comment on that as well, what I really enjoyed last year was I had that exact issue. I had a torn calf in one way or another, and the first port of call we did is we pulled off all running for a week.
Yeah.
The next week was cycling, and did lots of cycling. So I picked up the cycling big time because it wasn't hurting the calves at all. Awesome. Flat running came in on week 3. So this was mainly to keep the fitness, because obviously you've just torn it out before a race. You still got to keep your fitness for the race. And then dropped all hill sprints. I never did anything up until race day. So I was actually fine on race day, but then unfortunately tore it again during the race, like what you were saying. And that's too much too soon with injuries. Yeah. So,
but you gave it the best possible. So you gave it the best, possible chance to do it. And I think that's another thing as well. And I've done that with one of my comrades, guys, literally took him off exactly what you've done. And he got there and he had a really severe injury. And that's the other thing, is focus on your goal. So if relative rest or cross training is going to work, it's a very good point. Then that's also what I would suggest. And
yeah. And what I like about it is you're also keeping up your base fitness. So like you've done the hard work in the beginning of the year, you've worked so hard towards it. As long as you can just keep your base there, you're fine. You're not going to be as fast, definitely, which is cool, and you're not going to be as strong, but you'll still be able to do the event. If it's maybe more of like a event that you've really wanted to complete or get through. But okay, next one, which I saw come in, was around rolling ankles. So it's such a common one, and maybe we can tackle that one, and then maybe the other one is RTB. I think that's such a massive one that runners, especially those running long stuff for the first time, battle with. But let's maybe start with, you've rolled an ankle, you've hit a pothole, or you're on the trail and you've rolled it. It's sore, there's a bit of swelling, but you can still move. Is that also like a scale of severity, or how do you assess something like that?
Awesome. Yeah, so really good question. So yes, again, I think if we can give those tips for early recognition, then we'll get you back faster. So if you've tweaked your ankle, again, the history of the person, is this a regular occurrence? Have they got a weak ankle? Or is this the first time it's happened? That'll make a big difference in terms of how we treat it. If it is something that's ongoing, we then need to treat that, but then really look at, why is this continually happening? We need to look at the stability, the proprioception, and the strength of both legs, actually. And again, looking and seeing if there's a big difference between left and right, because often that is the case, is that the one leg can be a lot stronger and the other one just can't keep up. So that's the other thing. So I think the big thing is, you've tweaked your ankle, you can still kind of walk on it and run on it, you find it's fine. It's just if maybe you go sideways, because it's often that lateral ligament sprain that gives you issues, the outside of the ankle. And so what I would say is, again, it depends what you're wanting to do. So if you're a trail runner, it's going to be a lot more difficult because you've got a lot more unevenness. And that's when we would maybe strap, again, what are you doing? Are you doing a big event? Can we try strap it to really support it? There's various ways. Every physio will strap it differently, and it's just what they found works. But you can strap it, you know, just a basic figure of 8. You can add a figure of 6 on, which really supports the outside part. But the big thing with strapping is just to be careful if you're doing longer distances and you're not used to the strapping, that it's not too tight in certain areas, because you can get constriction there as well. So I like to use the elasticate, the kinesio tape, so that it does still give a little bit of give, but it's not fully supported, especially if it's just a small niggle that you've got. So it gives you a little bit of proprioception and a little bit of support, the way that we strap it, but it still has a little bit of give. If you use a rigid tape and you get it taped fine on the day, but your foot swells, you can actually have severe pain and swelling, and you've got to be very aware of that, because it can be quite a serious condition. So that's the other thing. So you can strap it, and that's something that I do. I also have, and this is one of the things you're talking about, one of the questions was first aid. I have this tape that I keep in my first aid, and it sticks to itself, it's a self-adhesive one. They cost, I think, like 40 Rand, and they're cool colors. At one of the shops, you can just grab it, but I keep this in my first aid kit bag, and it's just something you can use this, because what you can do is you can put some tension on it, strap it up there, and then as you let go, it'll pull in and support that area. So that's really, really useful. It's cheap, and it can be reused as well, and you can tear it, so you can tear off the size that you want. So if the ankle, what I would say is you go home, ice it, look at it the next morning. If you can do your basic movements, but maybe the inwards movements is a little bit sore, but you feel if you go walk, it's pain-free, jumping is pain-free, and straight lines are pain-free, then go for it. Be gentle, but go for it. But you just got to be aware, again, if you tweak it again, it's going to be an injury on top of an injury, and you're a bit vulnerable. But with the trail running, yeah, it is, you've got to test it out on the trail and see how it is with that, depending also how you run trail, and see if with strapping on you can manage. If it's quite tweaky and quite severe, then obviously I would say just get it looked by a physiotherapist. If it's a long-term ankle injury, you've most likely got ankle joint stiffness as well. And that's going to also be what we need to look at. We can look at the ligament, we can sort you out, you can get better from that. But if we don't sort out the actual ankle joint, which is where we come in, we mobilize it, we give you self-exercises to mobilize it at home by yourself, it potentially can come back again because that joint isn't in an optimal position. So those would be the main things. If you're getting things like night pain, massive amounts of swelling, you can't put your foot on the ground, and especially if you touch the bone on the outside, the malleolus, and it's pinpoint pain, that's one of the tests we have, and we actually send people for x-rays. But you'll know, like, it'll be quite a severe thing. So those, there is a little scale that we have that we use, and that's the main thing. If you can't walk immediately for 6 steps, if you have pinpoint pain on that lateral malleolus, the swelling is actually not a huge indicator. We actually don't use it as a main indicator. You can have massive swelling and it's just a small injury, or no swelling and it's a severe, it can be severe, as well as pain as well. Sometimes if you completely rupture your ligament, potentially you might not actually have pain because the whole ligament is just gone. While when you maybe have a partial tear, it can be more painful, but it's different in different people.
Yeah, that's really good. I just want to just comment for the guys watching. So if you're on the live webinar and you want to ask a question, if you just hover over the screen, you'll see there's a little chat icon or box. Just click on that chat box, which will open up a chat on the right-hand side of the screen, and you'll be able to post questions. Guys, I see, Dave, you got your hand up there. And then if you're on the Facebook Live, on the Fighting 100 page, you can also post questions in there, and we'll be able to answer them. So yeah, just send them through. Very, very happy to, it'll be great to get some extra questions in. So there's another maybe question I wanted to throw out there, and this was probably one of the first injuries I ever got, and that was around the ITB. You made a little bit of mention about it earlier, but it seems to be one of the most stubborn, hard injuries to get rid of. Is there, has there, and I know when I looked at it, it was a good couple of years ago. I mean, I'm talking, what, 6 or 7 years ago. Has anything changed over the last couple of years in terms of treating ITB? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a distance runner's nightmare, I think, usually with distance runners. And it rears its ugly head. And it's something that comes back again and again. I think the biggest thing with that, and that's where strength training comes in a big part, is I think we need to get more emphasis on that as runners. Personally, I found it has been massive. For myself, I can definitely feel I'm more even now. It definitely helped my running, just getting me up those hills a bit better and also recovering faster. And it also finds out if you do a really good exercise regime, you can find out where your weaknesses are before you have issues. Work on them, build it up, and then go from that. So interestingly, I also, Shaun, had ITB my first marathon. It was post-marathon. I was fine on the marathon with South Coast, and afterwards I had severe ITB, but I had it right up in the hip, so a little bit different to some people. Most people usually have it on the outside of the knee. Those are the two places, but it's still ITB. Often it's a bursa, so fluid-filled sac that can inflame, and that inflames the tissues around there and around the iliotibial band, which is the ITB. The ITB runs from your hip. It starts from tensor fasciae lata, which is a muscle on the side of your hip. You also have your glutes and things that come into that area. It goes down the outside of your leg, as most people know, around the knee joint, and it sits just below the knee joint. So it does go over that knee joint. So as your knee is bending and straightening, we're getting that rubbing over bursa, which then, if the alignment's not good, that's when it flares up. That's when we get the ITB, etc., etc. So that's kind of the mechanism. So I think the biggest thing for me is, and that's where also my running analysis comes in, is that I look at how runners run. Now, we're all different. I do not change something if it's working for them, but what I do is I just give suggestions if I feel that something may lead towards an injury. So a predominant thing they found is if you are dropping your hip, so let's say it's a right ITB, if you're dropping your hip on the right, your right knee is going inwards quite at a big angle, so you have what they call a big Q angle at the hip, and your knee is going inwards, then you're going to have a very big strain on that ITB. And then your foot, usually what happens is we call it overlapping. So if your feet are like this, and you got your line down your middle, often you'll have this happening. So it's a crossover, like we call a crossover. Yeah. So often people with ITB, and it can just be on the one side, they'll do this, and that'll be the ITB side. So they overstretch, the whole outside of that area is overstretched, coming across their body. And so that whole structure is overstretched and not stabilized. The hip goes down, everything goes down. And then also the whole posterior sling, so the back part of your area, also gets really tight and niggly.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing is we're trying to look a bit more broader and looking at stability. So from the hip area, from the glutes, and from the core. And I think that's a big thing. And then also how you run. Is your running, not helping it? Can we change that a little bit? Because, sorry, people train swimming. Why don't we train running? So I think that's very important.
Okay, so I just want to touch on, before we get to Dave, I see your question there, bud. So the things, we're talking about injury prevention. So one, you spoke about stretching. You've spoken about, obviously, not going out too hard when you started out. You spoke about rolling. And then you mentioned something now, which I just want to ask you a question around, and that's around strength training. So in my mind, when I hear strength training, I'm thinking about running up hills, and I'm thinking about interval training. I know that's not what you're talking about. So what do you mean specifically when you're saying, okay, what is a good sort of strength training regime to have as a runner? So often we just want to crack out those miles and get to our weekly mileage, and we totally forget about strength. And particularly for me, I think like the last thing I want to do is strength. It's like I'm so freaking tired from running. Like, how am I going to do strength training on top of tired legs and sore legs? Does that cool? Yeah. Let me hand that over to you.
Yeah, 100%. So when I had my ITB, my problem was I was very close to comrades. And what I'd done was I had a strength program I was doing, but I needed to obviously improve on it. So what I did was I did a lot of band walks for myself personally to get that glutes med going, specific to ITB, but also as a runner, your glutes max as well. Often people leave that out at the back. That also needs to really get worked hard. So your deep squats and things like that, but with caution. And that's why it's always good, especially if you haven't done anything, get advice first. That would be my big recommendation. For me, I went right through biokineticists, and they have been incredible because they know what you should be doing. And with my hamstring, I was scared to go down into a deep squat because it hurt last time. So why would I want to do that? And as a physio, I know I need to. And my bio was like, go down. You're ready now. You have to get that tissue mobilized now. You're in that phase. But he directed me at the right time to do that. And so I think it's really important that, you know, I don't want to just say, do you work your glutes max? And then you come to me with a proximal hamstring problem underneath because you've overworked that, and that has come apart as well. So I think it's just to be careful with that. So in terms of general strengthening as a runner, I would say the things, and we've had a lot of that over the last 6 weeks, which has been so exciting. It's been those like full body workouts and things. And you know, there's a few exercises that are brilliant. You've got your plank, your forward plank. If you do it properly, it gets your arms, it gets your abdominals, it gets everything. And then you can add on your, you know, extras on that. So you can do your leg extensions to make it uneven. You guys know all about those. Then you get your side plank, which then gets your glutes med going, which is really good. And you don't have to do them for long. I think that's the beauty of strength work. And as a runner, I didn't understand that at first. I thought, you know, I'd have to go on 2-hour exercise to get it going. But you don't. You literally, I do 30-minute workouts now with the guys that I train with, and I have such a good workout. I mean, those 30 seconds or 45 seconds really get you going. So I think the key things to start with are those core full body things. I would not start with ballistics if you're not used to it. That's anything jumping, hopping, anything like that. Do not start with that if you're not used to it. It's something you can graduate into. You push yourself to get there and then do a lot of it, but just be very careful with that. It's called Plyometrics, and that is the high end, high explosive. It's awesome. It'll get your sprinting going. It'll really, really help you as a runner, but you need to work up towards it. Too often we jump to those ones, those jump lunges, deep into a lunge, and then you come and see me because you've injured yourself. So I think those are a few of the key exercises. I think, yeah, just to get your glutes max, which can be the deep squat, but with caution, or there are other ones that you can do. Calf raises, simple calf raises, just going up onto your toes to strengthen your calf. Yes, the stretching is good, but the strengthening is often left out. So just calf raises while the kettle's boiling is really good. And then for me, obviously, hamstrings have been massive, and I can give you a lot of hamstring exercises. But again, just going onto your back and doing what we call a bridge, so lifting your bum off the ground and putting your legs out and in again, using a ball, a bow, you know, the little balls, and then bringing your legs in and out with your, there are lots of, I mean, you can look them up, but again, and the guidance is good if you're not sure how to do it to start with, and then you can go off and do it by yourself. But what I would suggest is you need, and I would even say take out a run to do it, is 1 to 2 sessions a week. And that's it, of 30 minutes to 40 minutes strength training. That'll be better than a 5 to 10K run because you will be preventing injuries and you will be strengthening yourself. So you are making more of your time, and it's actually more economical and better to do that. But you've got to find a fun way to do it. Either get together with someone to do it, or do it in between things, or make it so that it's not a chore. And I think that's a key thing. Like our running, we like either running by ourselves just to get out. We like to, when we can, run in a group because we want to socialize, or we run races because that's what we're aiming for. And this is really a great way to prevent or to strengthen what you've already got to make it even better.
I read an interesting book by, I think it's called your guy's name's Ben Greenfeld, and it's I think it's called Primal Endurance. And he's got this one section where he talks about strength hacks. And the one thing he does, he does triathlon, so it's not just running. But every time he walks past a door, he does some pull-ups. You know, he just does 2 or 3 pull-ups. And then, you know, every time he remembers, he gets up off his chair he does 3 squats, and then he walks and he does whatever he needs to do, and he sits down and when he gets up again. So all throughout his day, he's doing little bits of strength, which is, quite an interesting way to do it. So let's get to Dave's question here. So he runs with an Achilles problem, mainly on the left side, gets painful after about 5Ks on the climb, and it plays havoc. So I'll just throw one comment in there, because I had a very similar injury not too long ago. And it was quite an interesting one, because I changed my shoes. And straight away after I changed my shoes, the issue went away, because what I had found on that one particular shoe, for some reason, the heel, where cushions on your heel, was just slightly tighter, which caused irritation and then caused pain. And that's why it only also for me happened a little bit into the run. I'd start getting sore, and then it was sore afterwards. But yeah, let me hand over to you, Dawnie.
100%. And I think that's also something to look at, is your equipment, because we haven't really touched on that. And I think it is important. There are such a variety of shoes and other things out there. And I think also, especially if you're starting out or have tried a new shoe or want to try a new shoe, it's good to kind of get an opinion from someone who knows what they're talking about. And I don't know all the shoes, but what I do is when I do my running analysis, part of it is a shoe analysis. And what I do is I advise people, but what I first do is I get everything of what the shoe is that they have, and then I ask the experts if I need help. I'm never too afraid to ask because I don't know everything, and then I learn at the same time. So definitely look into the shoe. With your Achilles also, what you want to look at is just the one thing you can try, Dave, is to do shorter steps up, like shorter strides uphill, and see if that changes it at all. So you said, on the climbs, it particularly plays havoc. It would be interesting also to look at your length of your calf muscle. So your calves obviously go into your Achilles. Your Achilles you can't really stretch, but your calf muscle you can stretch. But also your calf, your hamstrings, and everything like that. And see if there is a big difference between your left side and so your affected side and your right side. And again, then kind of look at that. The other thing you could do, if it's something that you've had for a long time, look at your shoe, but what you can also do is maybe get a small heel support. So 6mm heel support that you pop into your shoe. I would actually probably pop it in both so that you're even. But what that does, it just raises the Achilles a little bit to not put as much pressure on the Achilles. So, because if you think of when you're going uphill, we go onto our toes. So it will put that pressure on. And the Achilles is obviously not liking that. Depending where on the Achilles, it's getting irritated. But that's also another consideration, just to get that little heel raise. That's something you can buy. Look at your shoe. Also look at the wear of the back of your shoe. I've forgotten what it's called, but right at the back. I know runners who've actually cut it there, because sometimes that physically is actually pushing on your Achilles and bruising it, and that's given them pain as well. So I've had runners who've literally, the shoe's fine, they literally just do a little snip at the back, like right at the back of the heel, and that solves their problem as well. But in terms of rehab, also look at, if you are having Achilles things, you need to strengthen your Achilles as well. So kind of your eccentric step downs, that's really, really important. That would be something you would be looking at for both sides, and going from there. But I hope that helps. That would be a few things to look at.
Yeah, I must say, I was also like, because also it sounds like, it's only after 5Ks. I mean, surely then it's not injured and it's getting niggled from something. I'm just totally assuming here. Or is it Achilles something that does get sore over time, even if it is slightly injured?
So it does depend on what distance you're doing. So for Dave, I don't know how far, I normally run. So like that's warmed up. So you'd almost think, it would get easier, but it's obviously getting niggled. But he says particularly on the climbs. So it might be positional. I don't know if it's just at 5Ks or the hills, or the hill is at 5 kilometers. But if it is hills, mostly it's positional. So the actual position rather than when in the run it is. But tendons tend to, they have a bit of a pattern, and that's also where we find out where you are in your healing. We ask, when is the pain coming on? When is it calming down? Is it during, after, at the beginning? Because that also gives us an indication of how we're going to treat you, because they're kind of degrees of the tendinopathy, and that helps us understand, are you only getting pain later? And it helps us gauge how to help you with your loading of the tendon.
Yeah, let me throw this out here. We just touched it now, and that's around equipment, and more particularly changing equipment, because the one big thing I messed up last year is I went from a formal heel drop on my shoe to a zero drop, and I didn't drop my mileage or intensity. I kept going at the same pace, and that's where the calf tear actually came in pretty soon after I made that change. So let's talk around. Okay, so I'm going out. I want to transition into a different shoe, and maybe it's got a slightly different heel drop or a slightly different thing. Do I need to back off? What are sort of things do I need to do to prevent injury?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's with anything new. You know, if you're doing speed work for the first time, if you're doing strength work for the first time, if you're doing trail for the first time or road for the first time, we've got to graduate things, and we're not very good at doing that. And I think that's exactly it. I think firstly, make sure, as you know, there's a massive spectrum with shoes, 12 mils, naught. So if you're going from 12, please don't drop to a naught. If you're wanting to get to that naught, I would strongly recommend you graduate a little bit. That's my personal opinion. Other people might have other ways they do it, and that's fine. If you want to go 12 and then naught, or barefoot running, or whatever the case may be, then you have to drastically drop, because that's going to change your style of running. And changing your style of running is going to get, your calves are going to work hard. It doesn't lessen the amount you're going to run. It changes where the force is coming through. So if you predominantly used your calf, now it's going to put more pressure on the Achilles, or you're going to use, X or Y. So I think that's more the case, is just, readying your body for that change. And what you can also do is, which is quite nice, is you alternate. So if you get your formal shoe and your naught, you keep your formal shoe, and once a week you do your naught. Then twice a week you do your naught. And that's quite a nice one as well. And that would tend to be on the shorter runs and not your speed work or anything like that. That's another way of introducing it as well. But yeah, again, there's various ways to do it. I don't think there's, one shoe doesn't fit all. But it's a case of figuring out what works for you, but definitely a graduated approach would be advisable. And it's not saying you can't change. I think that's also another thing. But just to be careful that if you are, and a classic example, just before lockdown, I had a lady who came to me for a running analysis. Really good runner, older lady, really good. And she is like, no, just this one little niggle. Analyzed her, she's got a really good style. There wasn't a lot we found wrong with her, wrong or different or what have you. But the one thing, as I was questioning her, and this is why I like to do an in-depth one, I go through nutrition, sleep, we go through everything, weight training, whatever you're doing, is she's like, yeah, I did change my shoes, and I went from this one to that one. And when I looked it up, it was exactly that. It was like a massive, complete spectrum change. And when she changed the shoes, a week later, she got a problem. And so for me, it's like, well, she's got her 2 grand shoes now. They still feel okay. Let's see if we can adapt it a little bit. Or does she actually need to use those as walking shoes and go back to something that she's used to? So it's a very good one.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm just going to throw out last net to anyone who wants to ask a particular question around injury prevention. If you're on the webinar, you can just post it in the chat. Otherwise, if you're on Facebook on the Fighting 100 page, you're welcome to just pop a comment there, and we'll get to it. But other than that, I'm going to try my best to do a summary of what I've heard today. So awesome. First, number 1, let's see if I'm a good student or not. Caution, don't go out too hard, especially in times of change, from garden running to road running, or from trail to road, or whatever you're doing. Secondly, make sure that you're stretching and biometric stretching while you're running. Run a K, warm up, and then do your stretches. Thirdly, rolling, trying to have some sort of rolling. And then what I heard, which I'm very excited about, is that you don't have to go more than 30 seconds on a trigger point, where I spend 4 or 5 minutes on a trigger point. And then equipment. So again, if you're changing over equipment, is to gradually make those changeovers. And then fifthly, having a strength regime of some sort twice a week would be helpful. So that's my crazy summary of tonight.
Awesome, good summary.
Anything else that you can think of off the top of your head before we say goodbye to everyone?
I think the biggest thing now is just enjoy your runs, and I think enjoy wherever you're at. And I think when you enjoy it, you're not pushing for time, and especially now while there aren't any races on, embrace that and use it as a different time to enjoy this time. For me, I'm very goal driven, so I understand that. But for me, like someone actually put out there, make this a time where you can do your own personal goals, and you know, whether it's just to run your own 5K as fast as you can or to beat that hill. But yeah, just enjoy your running, and I think that's the bottom line, whatever you do.
Yeah, I really like that, Dawn, and I've also had to try and embrace that because I'm also very goal driven, and like a lot of the content I also produce is around goals that I've got, like stupid goals, and I found myself quite like, oh my word, what am I going to do? Like, I've got nothing. But the one very helpful thing is to start adding the things or doing the things that you never were doing before. So like for me, one of those things is strength. Like, I haven't been doing it, but now it's such a perfect opportunity because I've got no stress to worry about, like, oh, am I going to get injured before comrades, or am I going to get injured before this race? I can start doing those strength exercises and putting them in. Start running different routes. You know, like I think we get stuck in that same route the whole time. Like, I've got my 10K route, I've got my 21K, I've got my 30K routes in my head, is to go exploring around the neighborhood a little bit.
Awesome.
Yeah. But Dawn, it's been such a helpful time. I know, yeah, I absolutely love these times. Maybe we can do it again, and we'll maybe think around something a little bit different or more specific if you're keen.
Yeah, very keen. Thanks, Shaun. No, that was awesome, and thanks for giving me the opportunity. I love to help. So yeah, and if anyone's got suggestions of a specific topic that you want to chat about, then shout.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in.
And maybe just to, I'll punch you because I know you're not going to punch yourself. But for me, I mean, I do big long distance stuff, and obviously put quite a lot of mileage on the legs. And the one thing that changed big time was when I went to Dawn, and she's a runner, and you did that. You went through my running style. You checked that. Yeah, and basically figured out what I was doing wrong. I mean, remember was those calf raises. We sat there and Dawn did some calf raises with me, and I only managed to do, I think, 12 in a minute or something stupid, and then she laughed at me and I felt all bad. But ever since I started changing that and adding that strength, I mean, it's made a massive difference to my running. Yeah, so I just want to throw that out there. Dawn's a legend. Go get yourself looked at. Next time you have an injury, don't just run on it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shaun. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining. And yeah, we'll catch up with you again. I think I've got Jen, my dietitian, who's going to probably be with me next week, Wednesday, which is going to be quite a fun one. So yeah, thanks to everyone watching, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Shaun. Cheers.